Mirth meets Earth. Discover the continents with the most curious pup. That's what we're talking about today on AMXkids. This is a fun one. I'll talk a little bit about it when I hit record, but this is going to be a kind of like a did you know, like cool facts about the 7 continents, because that's what we're studying today. The 7 continents. We're going to learn some neat new stuff about them, stuff that I'm certainly not a geography major, certainly was not a geography major. I've been to, as I made this out, I've been to 5 of the 7 continents, so I think that's pretty cool. But I also have like a bozo type thing that I realized. And I think that you'll have some of those too as we go through these 7 continents with our little friend Mirth. So I'm going to, I'll start recording the podcast now, but a reminder, you can get these videos, facebook.com/Charlie Spaniard, and I will upload them to youtube.com/Charlie Spaniard as well. So let's get set and start talking. Let's start officially recording AMXkids 26. 1, 2, 3, go. Hello, my young friends, and welcome to another episode of AMXkids. This is AMXkids 26. New AMXkids episodes are out every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Be sure to subscribe to the Spaniard Show on iTunes by typing in Spaniard Show. Search us out on YouTube. If you youngsters can get away from watching your friends playing video games, or not even your friends playing video games, recordings of people you don't even know playing video games, and you want to dive into some educational and I'd like to think entertaining content, be sure to visit youtube.com/Charlie Spaniard and follow along live streaming facebook.com/Charlie Spaniard. Now, I picked this book, Mirth Meets Earth, because I have a connection to it. Not too long ago, I saw a friend of mine, a former mixed martial arts enthusiast named Ariel Helwani. Now, the author of this book is Michelle Glasser, and the illustrator of the book is Jacqueline Stein, and that happens to be my friend's wife. I didn't even know that his wife was an illustrator and helped write kids' books, but I learned that. So thank you, Jacqueline, for this. Thank you, Michelle, for the book. It's a super cool book. It's about the continents. That's what we're going to talk about today, is the world, right? The world. I read a book on AMX Books. Now, I don't suppose the younger audience will enjoy this book because it's some pretty high-tech, it's pretty high-tech sciencey stuff, but it's put in a way that if you're a not super high-tech sciencey adult, you can probably comprehend it. But I read a book called Astrophysics for People in a Hurry by a guy named Neil deGrasse Tyson. And in that book, I learned a lot of stuff, a lot of cool stuff about the Earth. And he said, get this, he said that if you could, let's just say, exponentially become huge, right? And you could run your thumb around the globe, you wouldn't even feel it. There wouldn't be a bump. So all of the high mountains, all of the everything, that if you were in outer space and outer super duper space and you were able to run your finger along a globe, you wouldn't even feel it. It would be as smooth as a cue ball, or as smooth as a other smooth ball, a marble. Let's say that. So I got to learn some pretty cool things about Earth then, and we're going to learn some pretty cool things about Earth now. Now, as I was doing some research, I picked these kids' books because I think they're going to be fun and they're going to be relatively easy. I'll just bing, bang, boom, read them in 20 minutes, prep a lesson, and that's that. But I get into these incredible learning experiences. It happened last week with Humpty Dumpty when I learned the history of Humpty Dumpty. So it's fun to explore these facts. This is going to be a somewhat did you know type episode. So I'm going to talk about the 7 continents. I'm going to talk about my personal experiences from 5 of those 7 continents, but also some of the things that, some of the cool facts about them, but then some of the I'm going to say no duh type moments, things that I thought I knew or I just assumed that simply weren't true. Because we see a lot of things. We see a lot of things out there and we just assume that truths are truths and it's facts, but they're simply not. And I'll give you some examples, and I'm going to throw myself under the table and tell you one of the things that dawned on me that is a super obvious, no kidding, Spaniard, but I want to share that with you as well. So the first continent I'm going to start out with is Africa. So I've actually been to Africa. I've been to the northeastern tip of Africa in a country called Djibouti. I did a tour for the troops many years ago, back in 2012, when I was fighting with the UFC. we did a trip, and I'm going to talk about how I was in Southwest Asia as well. But I spent a portion of time at a military base, a U.S. military base in Djibouti. So different, so culturally different. It was such a neat experience. That's one of the reasons I enjoy traveling so much, is because you get to see different. And when you get to see different, to me, I love when my brain is activated. You know, I love when you have to think. You try different food, you have different senses activated, you see different dress and attire, you hear different languages, you see different food. It's just an activation of your senses, and that's one of the reasons I love traveling so much. So there's one theory, I want to tell you a little bit of facts about each of these continents, that the origin of man started in Africa. That is one of the theories. And in Spain, when I was in Spain, I learned, I never knew this. If you look at a map, I'd looked at maps growing up all the time. I had geography, I had, history classes. You have to label countries and states, etc. I didn't even realize it until I was in Spain that the northern tip of Africa, in a country called Morocco, is very close to the southern tip of Spain. So a lot of my friends, when I was in southern Spain, they would go to Morocco, they would go to Africa to hang out. And they told me that where they went in Morocco, there were a bunch of monkeys running around, and that it was a really neat experience there. Moving on to the next continent, Antarctica. So Antarctica is the bottom of the globe. It is the South Pole. Now here's one of the no-brainers that I wanted to kind of maybe throw myself under the bus a little bit, but bring it to your attention too, because maybe it's obvious to you, but maybe you've never thought about it. So Antarctica is a continent. It is in the South Pole. It is the bottom of the globe, to visualize where it's at. It's the bottom of the globe. No one lives there permanently. So there are no permanent civilizations. There are no permanent inhabitants in Antarctica. Penguins live in the South Pole. Penguins live on Antarctica, okay? Guess what does not live in the South Pole? Guess what does not live in Antarctica? Now, I remember the first time I heard this, I thought to myself, what? What are you talking about? Of course they live together. You know what does not live in the South Pole with penguins? Polar bears. Polar bears live in the North Pole. We assume, because it's icy and cold, I'm going to correct myself there. I assume because it's icy and it's cold and it's snowy and it's frigid and there's lots of cold water and stuff, that they live in the same place. No. Penguins live in the South Pole. Polar bears live in the North Pole. And remember, there are no permanent inhabitants in Antarctica in the South Pole. And in the book, our friend Mirth refers to Antarctica as a glacial wonderland. Moving on to the next continent, Asia. So Asia is the continent with the most people. There are 48 countries in Asia. Some of the countries that you would probably know, that I would probably know: Russia, China, Japan, the Middle East, India. When I did the tour for the troops, I believe we were in 6 different countries. We touched in Djibouti, that's where we landed first, and then we flew up and over to Southwest Asia, which is essentially was the Middle East, which is the southwestern part of Asia. And I was in Oman, Qatar, or Qatar, Q-A-T-A-R, pronounced both ways. I was in the United Arab Emirates, UAE, United Arab Emirates. 2 big cities in the UAE are Dubai and Abu Dhabi. I was also in Bahrain, and I was in Kuwait. So over the span of about 2 weeks, we were gone, and we went to these 6 different countries. It was part of a tour for the troops with the UFC. So we went to military bases. If you want a neat experience, familiarize yourself with the military, visit military bases, and show genuine, sincere interest. It was such a humbling and neat experience to travel to these countries that were so far away. We would get up in the middle of the night. We would fly to another country. We would wake up. We would have an event in the morning when the sun was rising, and then we'd take a nap, and then we'd get up, and we'd have these. It was such a neat experience. We'd do some training as well. It was so hot. That was one of the things that I'll never, ever forget. When I was in Djibouti, when I was in Southwest Asia, the Middle East, it was so hot, and it was so dry. I remember, I feel like it was Kuwait, but it could have been one of the other countries. I remember we were driving along a highway, and we stopped, and it was nothing but sand. And I remember stepping outside of our van, just the immense power and the immense heat coming from that sun was unbelievable. And here's another obvious that was not obvious to me. So as we have the polar bears in the North Pole, the penguins in the South Pole, did you know, right? Did you know, maybe you knew and I'm just, little bit of a dummy here. I did not know this. Did you know that tigers and lions do not inhabit the same continents? Tigers are in Asia, lions are in Africa. They are not together. Tigers are the biggest wild cat that there are. Siberian tiger is the biggest large cat. It gets up to 800 pounds. So tigers are in Asia, lions are in Africa. Another no kidding, Spaniard. You should have learned this stuff. But I didn't. I was too focused on wrestling, and I was too focused on other stuff other than world geography. So those are some cool facts about Asia. Moving on to Australia. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Okay, I'm going to do it. G'day, mate. That is our continent, Australia. So listen to this. It's the oldest, the flattest, and the driest continent. Now, I remember hearing, I listened to a lot of outdoors shows, a lot of outdoors personalities, hunting, etc. And I'm really interested in early civilizations. Okay, so Australia is home to very early civilizations. And one of the things that I remember hearing, but I didn't quite know it, so I had to look it up and get the facts. 85%, approximately 85% of people on Australia live within, I think it was 50 miles of the coast. 85%. That means that there's big, open, dry, empty lands, the outback, in the center of the country. So 85% of people live close to the coasts. And it's also the smallest continent, so is Australia. And there's no large predatory animals. There's no large predatory animals. And 90% of the native animals found in Australia are not found anywhere else in the world. Some of those animals are kangaroos, wallabies, dingo. What is a dingo? A dingo is a wild dog. And koala bears. They're so cute and cuddly. Moving on to Europe. So Europe is comprised of 50 countries. I was never in Australia, but I was in Europe. When I was in Europe, I was in Spain and I was in France. One time, this is a fun story. When I was in, these are the stories that if you open yourself up to experience and you open yourself up to travel and you open yourself up to learning other people, other cultures, other ways of living, etc., you experience all these experiences that turn into lifelong memories. So I was in Spain. I spent, probably in my life, I spent 6 or more months in Spain studying, learning the Spanish language, culture, etc. On one of my trips home from Spain, we took we had a layover in Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. And I remember I was with a Spaniard, a young Spaniard who studied here in Albright College, and I believe it's in Philadelphia area. It's in Pennsylvania, Albright College. And he had traveled the world a lot, back and forth, U.S., and I could just tell he knew what he was talking about. You always have to be careful. When you travel and you meet new people, you never know, okay? You never know, so you always got to have your guard up at least a little bit to kind of gauge their credibility. After a while, talking to this kid, I figured I trust this kid. He's experienced. I could tell through the conversation. So we got there late. So we got to Charles de Gaulle. We got to France late. Our plane arrived late, and then we had a connection back to the U.S. And he said, don't worry, don't run. No tienes que correr lentamente, vamos a andar. No se van. Sin tú y yo, no se van. Without me and you, they're not going to leave, right? Because there was a whole bunch of us. Turns out we took our good old time, and we missed our connection to the U.S. Anyway, I got to spend essentially a full 24 hours in Paris. We got to see the Eiffel Tower. I got to meet all of his Parisian friends. It was such a neat experience. It all came because I missed my flight. So if they won't wait for you, they will leave. So you better run to your next connection. But yeah, Spain and Paris. I've flown through England as I would go over to Europe. I've stopped in England to connect to other flights, but haven't spent any significant time there. Moving on to North America. So North America, this was a cool thing. I want to say I knew the majority of this, but I had never considered it. North America is not just the United States and Canada. I feel like that's what most people would think, is North America is the United States and Canada. We have Canada, the U.S. We have Central America. What's Central America? Central America is that space between Mexico, the southern tip of Mexico, and South America. Central America, that's like Belize, that's Honduras, that's Nicaragua, that's Guatemala. That's those countries, a little connector that connects Mexico to South America. So we have Canada, the U.S., we have Central America, we have El Caribe, we have the Caribbean. I never even thought that's part of North America. We have the Caribbean, we also have Bermuda, and we have Mexico and Greenland. Greenland? I didn't know Greenland was part of North America. I want to tell you something interesting, a personal experience I had. I went to Bermuda, one of the most beautiful places on earth. Horseshoe Bay in Bermuda is beautiful. It is absolutely gorgeous. So I was on vacation, went on a cruise, we were in Bermuda, and it was really interesting to me. So whenever you go to different cultures, different countries, and you experience these different cultures, you start to learn biases or prejudices or ways of thinking, philosophies that certain people have over other people. And it was really interesting to me. When I was in Bermuda, it was really interesting to me to hear how the Bermudians were very, very adamant about we are not in the Caribbean, that we are not Caribbean folks. They are the Caribbean, we are Bermuda. So they were very, very adamant about differentiating themselves from the Caribbean. Why? I don't know. I'm not a Bermudian, but it was really interesting, and that's something that stuck with me since I had left there. So again, North America, we have Canada, the U.S., Central America, El Caribe, Bermuda, Mexico, and Greenland. I spent some time in Guatemala. I spent some time in Mexico, but that was for spring break, so that doesn't really count. I've been in Canada. I fought in Canada. And like I said, I was in Bermuda. We took a cruise to Bermuda, which was absolutely beautiful. In Guatemala, I want to point this out porque a mí me encanta el español. I love Spanish. Me encanta aprender de la lengua y la cultura hispana y suramericana y todo esto centroamericana. I just love learning about Spain, Mexico, Latin America, Central America, South America, all of that. I love it. So I got to spend a significant amount of time, about a month in Guatemala, and it was really neat because I got to learn about the native cultures, the Mayans that lived there. I was in a town called Xela, Quetzaltenango, Xela. I got to go to Lake Atitlan, which is a beautiful lake, volcanic country. It was just so beautiful. One of my bucket lists is to go to Machu Picchu in Peru. So, anywho, that was my little story about Guatemala. Moving on to South America. South America, South America has, and I've gotten really into this because I've gotten really into the Rocky Mountains lately. And South America has the largest mountain range. So what is the largest mountain range in the world? The longest mountain range in the world is, it stretches from southern South America to northern South America. It is the Andes Mountains. The Andes Mountains is the longest mountain range in the world. We have the highest mountain ranges over in Asia, which is the Himalayas. We have the Rockies, which is, I believe, the third longest, and that is 3,000 miles. And here's one of the things I wanted to point out, okay? So I fought in Brazil. That was my trip to Brazil. I fought down in Uberlândia, Brazil. I believe it's in the southeastern-ish of Brazil. But one of the things, so we have the continents. We have Africa. We have Antarctica, we have Asia, we have Australia, we have Europe, we have North America, and we have South America. Now, what I would recommend you doing, if you really want to get something more out of this episode than just hearing me say it and hearing me spit out a bunch of facts, one of the things that I like to do to learn is, I gave you maybe, let's say 5-ish per continent, 5-ish facts per continent. You don't have to remember them all. But maybe if you just go back and listen through each one and pick out one thing that you remember from each continent, that might jog your memory, right? That might be like a little keystone thing that you remember, which might jog your memory to some other aspect of that continent culture. Or you could pick one that you find most interesting and go do a little bit more research on that. Learn about the people, learn about the food, learn about the animals, learn about the topography, the mountains, the valleys, the rivers, the streams, the beaches. It's a beautiful world out there. And our friend Mirth does a great job of showing us that in the book, Mirth Meets Earth. He travels around the world. He highlights, it's beautiful illustrations, actually. That was a very good job, Jacqueline. I'm looking at these pictures. They're absolutely beautiful. But he does a great job of pointing out the different people and culture and animals and other facts that I did not mention. Now, the one thing I wanted to throw myself under the bus and kind of say, probably a little bit embarrassing. I was looking through this and I thought, where's the Arctica? The Arctica. Wait a minute. What's going on here? So I did some research. The North Pole, or the Arctic region, is not a continent. Okay? Duh. I knew that. I knew that. But it still dawned on me, wait a minute. So I did some research. The reason the North Pole is not a continent, right, or the Arctic area, the Arctic region is not a continent, and the South Pole, or Antarctica, is a continent, is because there is no land. There's no land mass underneath the North Pole. Okay, it's just ice. It's just glaciers. It's just ice. It's always moving. Whereas in Antarctica, land is below the South Pole, is below Antarctica, and that is why it is a continent, and I am a dummy. This has been AMX Kids 26. What I want you to get most out of this book, out of our experience with Mirth meets Earth, is how much there is to learn about the Earth. About the earth, about our world, about the people, about the customs and the culture, about the dress, about the food, about the music, about the dance, about the topography, about the mountains and the rivers and the valleys and the streams and the animales and todo esto. There is so much to learn out there in the world. But I'm going to warn you, once you start learning one thing, you're going to travel down that rabbit hole like I did. I could have taught you 10,000 more facts about our Earth, but I had to limit it on AMX Kids to approximately 20 minutes. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you again, Michelle and Jacqueline, for a tremendous book. It was a fun book, Mirth meets Earth. It's a very easy read, beautiful pics, short, concise pages with lots of facts, interesting facts. Thank you, my friends, for tuning in. This has been AMX Kids 26. Reminder, new episodes come out every Tuesday. AMX Kids is one of the 4 learning tracks on the Spaniard Show. We have AMX Books, which come out every Monday through Friday, short 8-minute episodes. We have AMX Kids, which comes out on Tuesdays. We have AMX Talks, interviews that come out on Thursdays. And then at the end of the week, we sum it all up with AMX Weekly, which comes out on Saturday mornings. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the Spaniard Show on iTunes. Subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com/Charlie Spaniard. Follow along the live streams, facebook.com/Charlie Spaniard. And if you want to talk about books or anything else, training, mixed martial arts, nutrition, books, learning, any of that stuff, be sure to connect at Charlie Spaniard on social media. That's that. I like that. That was that was kind of a everything at you episode, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you all on the flip side tomorrow for AMX Books. Subscribe, Spaniard Show on iTunes, youtube.com/Charlie Spaniard, facebook.com/Charlie Spaniard, at Charlie Spaniard on social media. See ya.